What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 77, and this is no ordinary episode. For those of you that have been keeping track on our social media pages, this is our 1 year anniversary super show. So thank you for tuning in, thank you for listening or watching, wherever you're kind of catching this episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is our anniversary Ask Johners Q&A special, and we do have a very, very special guest host joining in very, very soon. I'll introduce you to that guest host very, very soon. We are going to be covering this week's NXT, AEW Dynamite. We're going to be going into AEW Full Gear predictions. Of course, AEW have their next pay-per-view on Saturday. Myself and my guest will be talking about those matches and who we think might win. We've also got a range of listener questions. We did this back in episode 50, where we did an Ask Johners special to mark our 50th episode. And although this is episode 77, it's our birthday. It's our celebration, our anniversary edition. So we sent out a message to all of our listeners and social media followers to send us questions, and they did. We have quite a few interesting questions to answer. But first of all, as I like to do at the beginning of every single episode, is shout out about our social media plugs, where to find us on the internet. On Twitter, of course, our Twitter handle is @withjohners_pod. On Instagram, it's instagram.com/wrestlingwithjohners, and go out and search our ever popular, fun, friendly and interactive Facebook community page. Just search Wrestling with Johners. We're doing a lot of work on our YouTube page. More recently, we can find a lot more of our podcast turned into video cast, where the live content is recorded, so you can see the kind of one-to-one, the face-to-face recording of how then podcast went down, and just search our podcast channel, our YouTube channel, Wrestling with Johners. This is the #1 podcast for all of your NXT and AEW, and occasionally we do dip into NXT UK, not as often as we used to. We do talk at length any WWE pay-per-views and AEW pay-per-views, and of course our next episode after this one will be our AEW Full Gear review. We'll talk more about that later on. So please spread the word. Give us a follow on all of our social media pages, and give all of our YouTube pages and YouTube podcast pages a subscribe, please, so you don't miss out on a single episode, so you're notified every time a new episode drops. So on to our guest host for today, our special guest. It's Mr. Kurt Johansson. So welcome to the podcast, welcome to Wrestling with Johners. Thank you for jumping on board with us this week, Kurt.
Thank you, John. Happy to be here. And you actually pronounced my last name right.
Yes.
Which I was like, I wonder how I was gonna pronounce it. But yeah, really happy to be here, and to be, when you asked me to be part of the 1 year anniversary, that was quite an honor, to be fair. Like, I'm just a podcaster like yourself, and for you want me to be on this like big episode for yourselves, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I wanted to get you involved because, as I said to you off air, I was a big fan of your previous podcast channel, Wrestle Thoughts podcast, which ended a few months ago, but you had that going for 2 years. So we've just hit our 1 year anniversary. I am right in thinking that Wrestle Thoughts went on for 2 years. So how did Wrestle Thoughts all come about? You obviously did it with your co-hosts, but give me a little bit of a history lesson to your podcasting career then, Kurt.
So I started off just writing articles for the Indie Corner, doing some sort of interviews, speaking to. I did some stuff with like Bubblegum, and I did stuff with Eve, and then a couple of my friends one of my friends was starting up a podcast, and they were getting somebody involved, Dave, who's been a big instrument behind Wrestle Thoughts and now Ringsider, doing like all the technical stuff. And so I'd met with Jamie, my friend, and the other co-host, Callum, that we knew who each other were, but we didn't really know each other. So we just had a quick chat, and it was like, oh, this is what we're thinking. Would you want to get on board? None of us had podcasted before, so I was like, you know what, let's do it. So when we first started out, we were terrible. I won't lie, we were terrible. But then I think it was just, as soon as the recording happened, we changed. Everything about us, as soon as that light went on, changed. And we weren't being us, so thought, no, strip all that back, just be ourselves, how we are in the pub when we're talking about wrestling. So yeah, Wrestle Thoughts podcast was born. We was doing quite a lot of weekly shows, and then like life happened. I'd started a new job. We had quite a lot of stuff going outside. So we had a mini hiatus. During that hiatus, we went to All In together, the three of us. We flew out to Chicago. And then when we got back, I was like, you know what? We're going to get it back up and running. We're going to do the podcast again. And we went from strength to strength, to be fair. We'd spoken to people like Isiah was our first ever proper interview. Our friend Nathan Cruz. And then I spoke to Shane Taylor. We spoke to Lance Archer and Sin Bodie. The boys had spoken to Mike Quackenbush. So all of a sudden, we got some sort of following, and we joined up with the former Brainbuster radio network, and things were going quite well. And then life happened again. I kind of departed from the group. The boys then left Brainbuster before Brainbuster imploded, and we got back together. We rebranded, known as Ringsider Pod. And we're just doing our own network as well. No politics, no bullshit, essentially. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, no problem at all. Go for it.
No, I'll try and keep it tame, but no BS. So we created Zealots Network. And the thing about Zealots Network is we're not wanting it to be just all wrestling related. So everybody that's involved has been involved in Wrestle Thoughts podcast at once upon a time, whether or not there was a proper member or they've been a recurring guest. So on the Zealots Network, there's myself, Callum, and Jamie for Ringsider Pod, which you can find us at Ringsider Pod. We've also got Make It Darker, which you can find at Make Darker. They're Rivers and James, who used to be recurring figures on Wrestle Thoughts podcast, and they're doing a podcast about horror. So their first one dropped as part of our relaunch on the 31st of October, where they're talking about the Halloween movie. So I think that's really cool. And then Jamie and Callum are doing their own thing called The Occult. So you can find that at Occult Pod, where they're just talking about, the first one was talking about Area 51, so they're talking about loads of different conspiracies and things like that. So we're slowly branching out away from professional wrestling. We've not got anybody external on board yet. We thought we'll get Zealots up and running to show where people can trust us. And then we might look at bringing in more people, expanding it. Different genres, more wrestling content, because we can only cover so much wrestling ourselves, as you probably know, John. But yeah, it's good to be back. We've got a few people in the pipeline to be speaking to, and I'm just enjoying podcasting again. Coming on your show. I recently went on Badlands podcast. I'm going to be on a podcast again tomorrow morning with Aussie Lucius. So there's so much going on, and yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's fantastic to have you on board, and like I say, good to see that you're back up and running with the Ringsider podcast. Now, I just want to kind of go back in time, and I think it was about May this year where you had a fair bit of success, certainly on Twitter, with a certain video that you took that went viral, and it was kind of an unexpected happening at a WrestleGate Pro show. So it was when Pac and Adam Page had their impromptu match, which in the end didn't take place at Double or Nothing, but is scheduled to happen on Saturday at Full Gear. So tell us a bit about that, and kind of it just went berserk, didn't it?
That was crazy, to be fair. WrestleGate was lucky to have them as one of our podcast sponsors. So we'd gone down there, live tweeting the show. And what I'm glad is, like, a lot of the guys that was working on the show or working on the pre-show with NGW, they were there. None of them kind of spoiled what was happening, which is quite good. And when we're speaking, like, essentially backstage to keep us away from where Paige was, which I was kind of happy, because then it made we were fans for the moment.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were ready with a camera or anything like that. All I knew was, when Pac's out, have your camera ready? So I was like, oh, okay. Let's see what he's going to say. And I just thought I was getting the heads up regarding the promo. But no, he hits the promo. Adam Page's music hits. Everybody just starts going absolutely berserk. And then the fact they had the match. So I think I had potentially three videos. One of them got about 140 plus thousand views, which AEW, Cody, the Bucks, they retweeted that. And I remember just so desperately, whilst it's all happening, getting that video uploaded. The signal was absolutely terrible in Rushcliffe Arena in Nottingham. I'm like, it's not loading. I clicked retry, finally loaded. And then literally as it's going on, I'm going to Callum. I was like, Cody Rhodes has just quoted our tweet.
Oh no!
ITV have
Crazy.
just retweeted it, and before we know it, like we had Wrestling Observer, we had Forbes. Like that's crazy. Forbes website had a snippet of our Twitter page, and it was like as reported from at WrestleThoughts podcast, and then it shows our thing, and that was on Forbes like website. That was surreal. We're just three guys talking about wrestling, and I'm glad we got all the different footage. The Forbes footage that they used was actually the one after the match where Pac attacks Page saying, "I'm not going to AEW." So that one was going viral. The fact that this match is going viral. I had the Adam Page promo at the end as well, and it was pretty surreal.
And kind of speaking about something more recent, one of your tweets was also noticed at the beginning of this week's AEW Power. So I don't know if you're aware of that, but obviously if you hashtag NWA Power, you know that they might pick it up, they might use it as part of the introduction to this week's opening segment or opening video package to NWA Power. Was you aware of that, Kurt?
Yeah, I hadn't properly seen NWA Power this week. And Jamie had watched it, but I'm guessing it's skipped the 5-minute intro. And somebody tweeted, was like, "Congrats on getting noticed for NWA Power." And I was like, what the hell? And at the time I actually had NWA Power on. I was at work on my lunch, just watching it. I was like, right, skip back to the front.
Yeah.
Watched all the social media stuff. And yeah, it was there was 40 seconds left. And it was actually Jamie's tweet off the Ringside, for the Ringsider pod account. He was like, "Bit late to the show with episode 4. Hashtag NWA Power, I say all the time. I love the way real Nick Aldis holds the title. He holds it with so much respect and honours it the way it should be honoured, paying respect to previous champions. To me, that title is the Real World's Championship."
Amazing.
And to have that posted on was another cool moment. We've had a few cool moments over the past, but I think the viral of the Pac and Page video that just recently coming on, especially after we've took the mini hiatus, it's been good to see that people didn't forget us. During whenever you rebrand, like people knew us as WrestleThoughts or WT Pod, so to do that rebranding and people still be excited, like again when we was off air, he was like, "Oh, I'm really glad that you're back. I really enjoyed the show." And that means quite a lot, the fact that how many people that I've spoken to directly, because they were like, at the time, and I think it was like when you tried getting me on one of the previous shows and I didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of, I don't know, I was, wrestling Twitter was rather annoying for me. So I was like, I do want to do guest spots, but I don't know when I'm going to be doing it yet. And the fact that now I'm doing them and people are reaching out and just like, so glad that you three are back. I'm so glad that you're doing your individual stuff. It's good to know that our content entertain people.
Yeah, it's all good as far as I'm concerned anyway. So I can't wait to see more from you and the rest Ringsider team. But let's start with some listener questions then, Kurt, because we've got quite a few to get through. So before we start talking about NXT this week, let's go to our first listener question. It's from Tommy Lynch from Watch Along Wrestling. So Tommy asked, what are your favourite live shows that you've attended? So he's got 3 questions, and that's the first of 3. What are your favourite live shows that you've attended? I've got down here that they're both kind of WWE related to a certain degree, but I was lucky enough to go to New Orleans in 2018 for last year's kind of WrestleMania weekend. I was there for 5 days, as many of you know. Not only was I there for WrestleMania, which was an amazing experience, just being there inside the Superdome, but probably the highlight of my 5 days there and one of the best shows that I saw. The best show while I was there, and certainly in my lifetime, was NXT TakeOver New Orleans. And you had that amazing 6-man ladder match to kick things off. You had the fantastic NXT Championship match between Andrade and Aleister Black, and then that brilliant blood feud to cap things off with Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. So it was just an amazing show, and I'm sure you'll agree, Kurt, that TakeOver New Orleans is probably one of the best takeovers they've done. Since they started doing takeovers about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. Like takeovers to me, has been untouchable for the past couple of years in terms of quality. The only thing that would normally, that would definitely rival it was Wrestle Kingdom. And now it's just really interesting to see that there's another player in town that's also on a Wednesday. But yeah, takeovers are always something special. And it's going to be interesting to see what takeovers are like. The fact that we've got competition on a Wednesday now, and essentially a Saturday if they go head-to-head on the pay-per-view dates. But NXT are also now on the same... Well, they've always been above in terms of quality, in my opinion, for Raw and SmackDown. But they're being acknowledged to be a third brand rather than the developmental. So I'm excited to see what the next set of takeovers also bring.
Definitely. And what about yourself? What is your favourite live shows that you've attended then, Kurt?
My favourite live show would have been All In.
Right.
I've never done America before. I've always wanted to do like WrestleMania and things like that. But when All In got announced, we was like, we got to do it. We've got to do it. And we did it. We did the full StarCast event. We spent a couple of days in Indiana first before going to Chicago. We'd met up with one of our friends that lives in Indiana. And then we drove to Chicago. We got to meet CM Punk on I think it was the Friday, which was a surreal experience. He was a lot nicer than what people say. He had our accent and thanked us. The fact that, one, we've come out that far, come to Chicago. Two, for meeting him. And three, saying it's cool to see us giving All In guys a chance.
Yeah.
So that was quite a surreal moment. And StarCast was pretty special for me. Before, like, it's not in terms of like the podcasting stuff, but I'd got mentioned on X-Pac 12360 before. And X-Pac's been quite a big... I'm a big fan of his for how he speaks about depression, mental health, things like that. And it was that podcast that kind of inspired me to get into podcasting. It helped me once upon a time when I was at my worst stage going to counselling. I'd just put it in, watch it on YouTube, do the counselling, put it in, watch it on YouTube whilst I'm going home. And I just sent a tweet. Well, I didn't send a tweet. I sent an email into the show, and basically just like a thank you, saying, look, the fact that you do all this regarding the mental health, and I just wanted to thank how the show's helped me, not everybody that was on the show. And I explained a little bit about myself and then how crippling the depression was, and now that I'm coming out the other side. And on the X-Pac 12360 show, I got a DM from Jimbo from the show saying, oh, we spoke about you today, mate. And it was basically Jimbo had mentioned it, and he only said my first name, and X-Pac was like, Kurt Johansson. I'll let him off with the mispronunciation. It's not often like one of your heroes friggin' acknowledges you. And he was like, yeah, I saw that, yeah. And as Jimbo went to move it on, X-Pac brought it back and it was basically just giving some context to the listeners. And he was on about that. I went from meeting the Queen and doing Buckingham Palace garden parties to not leaving my house and being essentially suicidal and doing suicide attempts. And then I've worked it round, and that I just appreciate the fact that the podcast was what helped me go back into the community and travel around. And I got to meet X-Pac. Like, that was really cool hearing him say that. And I got to meet X-Pac in the meet and greet. And then I saw him in the lobby and was having a proper chat. And one of the boys had actually got a picture of it where X-Pac's the smile on his face is like infectious. Like, he was so happy to see me and was just chatting, and he was asking how I was doing with the mental health, and the fact that he still remembered me and was having that chat about it. That was one of the key moments for me. And then obviously the show of All In, Cody, Nick Aldis is the best atmosphere I've ever witnessed.
Yeah, it was electric.
That gave me goosebumps. It gives me goosebumps every time I watch it. We watched All In, and there was a massive storm going on, like thunder and lightning, whilst we're in the car park waiting to get into the car. And we're just like, all four of us was just stood looking at each other like, what have we just witnessed? Because that was incredible. Like, something so independent, so self-made to be that good. And we went home, couldn't be bothered to go out, ordered a takeaway in, put it on the Fight TV app, and watched All In back immediately after being there live. And then I watched the Aldis and Cody match on the plane home as well. So for me, All In, hands down, is the best wrestling experience in the weekend that I've ever done.
What an amazing answer. That's fantastic. Another one of Tommy's questions from Watch Along Wrestling was who are your favourite wrestlers growing up? I must have had a conversation with him mentioning that Man Mountain Rock used to be one of my favourites back in the early to mid 90s, the former Max Payne from WCW, of course. But for me, favourite wrestlers growing up, I'm a big fan of Ric Flair. A lot of people know that I'm a big fan of Ric Flair. Just love his personality, his charisma, his mic skills, just love what he did in the ring. Sabu as well, another one of my favourites growing up. And Sid, believe it or not, so was one of my favourites. Just loved his look, his size. I just felt that, it kind of, he was the total package of a wrestler as far as I was concerned when I was younger. And he just looked the part. And I felt that WWF back in the day could have done a bit more with him. But loved him in his kind of first stint with WWF back in 91, 92. What about yourself? Any favourite fond memories of when you were growing up? Any favourite wrestlers when you were younger, Kurt?
Always stood out was like Rock and Hogan when I was a kid. I grew up during the Attitude Era. I watched the old WrestleManias and WCW tapes, so I was really accustomed to Hogan, but also Sting. They were like my three main pillars. Obviously, everybody appreciated Austin, but I think they were my three idols when I was growing up in wrestling.
Yeah.
And it was just everything about them. All three of them was just larger than life. And it was just, the big thing for me was how Sting was so completely different when he changed the gimmick. As a kid at first, I thought it was just a different person when I was a young lad. And to appreciate how somebody's proven you can be that blue collar American babyface and then change your character completely to have such grit and depth to the character was tremendous. And I think a lot of people praise Jericho for reinventing himself. I think Sting needs that same acknowledgement, especially all the reinventions he did in TNA as well.
Moving on to another question. Ashley Clements asks, what promotions do you want to go to? After the last Progress show in Camden, David Starr highly recommended going to OTT Wrestling just for the experience. Well, I've not been to many wrestling shows this year. I've had to start a new job and been busy with that. So I'd like to go to a lot more wrestling shows in general, to be honest with you. And an OTT is definitely on my bucket list. Would love to go there. I've heard so many great things about OTT. I've seen quite a few of their shows. Like I say, David Starr and Jordan Devlin match was outstanding. I know that Walter's been a big star over there and has had some classic matches with Jordan Devlin as well. But what about yourself? Have you been to OTT or any kind of urge to jump on a plane or a boat over to Ireland to watch it for yourself?
I've not done it yet. It is on the bucket list, OTT and WXW 16 Karat Gold. They're my two closer shows that I want to experience, but I'm getting married next year. This year I've done way too many shows, so I'm having to be a little bit tighter on the purse strings.
Look after them pennies, yes.
Yeah. But I was speaking to the fiance. She's not really into, she isn't into wrestling at all. Mania, of course, everybody wants to do Mania, but I'm looking at doing Japan. I want to do Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah,
and I think that's going to be my next big travel. Will be Wrestle Kingdom.
You're not going to Japan for your honeymoon by any chance, are you, Kurt?
Unfortunately, not. Tried it, but no. Hopefully, there's good wrestling promotions in Greece.
Yes. Maybe, you never know. I haven't heard of too many, but I'm sure there are. But let's have a look at this week's NXT then, Kurt. So, there's another fantastic show, as always. I can't wait to talk about NXT this week. So the show opens with footage of the OC from Raw, Gallows, Anderson and AJ Styles attacking the Undisputed Era backstage before making their way out to the arena and into the ring. There's a huge "This is awesome" and two sweet chants from the fans. AJ says that Undisputed Era and NXT came to SmackDown and Raw because they wanted a war. AJ says that he's bringing the war to them. Then Tommaso Ciampa comes out and welcomes the OC to the main roster. I love how he kind of said that NXT has always been the main roster as far as he's concerned, and it certainly is as far as I'm concerned as well. Tommaso says that NXT has and always has been the show, and that it just so happens to be his home, Daddy's home. AJ asks, are the three of them meant to be scared of just him? This then sets up the arrival of Keith Lee and Matt Riddle. Tommaso then challenges the OC to a war tonight, and AJ accepts on behalf of the OC. So an awesome way to kick off this week's NXT. What were your thoughts, Kurt?
I lost my shit. Like, give WWE props where it deserved. They made it seem like there's no way possible that anybody of importance could be on NXT from the WWE roster because of the European tour. Yeah. So when we saw that and we saw them moments ago, I thought, that's cool, but are they just doing that? And then when they started walking through the crowd, I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be good.
Yeah.
And it didn't disappoint. I liked the smugness of Styles and the OC, where there's like, so this is NXT, and it was as if this isn't much, like we was too good for this place. But Tommaso Ciampa, to me, is killing it every single time. And I want Styles and Ciampa. Give me that singles match.
Yeah, fingers crossed it could happen. Survivor Series is just around the corner, so you never know. The first match of the night on NXT was Pete Dunne versus Damien Priest. So this was a rematch from a couple of weeks ago after Damien Priest defeated Pete Dunne following a low blow and then a reckoning for the win. This was a real battle between these two, with Priest dominating much of the match in the early going with his brutality and quick strikes. Priest even got a 2 count from a Falcon Arrow. Dunn managed to turn the match around, though, with an X-Plex and a moonsault off the turnbuckles. Dunn then did a backflip off the steel steps over Priest. However, he did get choke slammed for his troubles on the ring apron by Damien Priest. Dunn recovers to get a close near fall from a sit-out powerbomb. There's a sunset flip over somersault plancher over the top ropes from Damien Priest onto Dunn on the outside. It's a move that you usually see someone like a Grand Metalik or a Cruiserweight do, but Damien Priest just does that, and it's absolutely awesome every time. Priest also gets a close near fall from a crucifix bomb. However, Pete Dunne is able to get the win after the referee gets bundled into the corner, this time enabling Dunne to hit a low blow of his own, getting his own back from a couple of weeks ago from their previous match, before applying a cross arm breaker for the submission win. So I thoroughly enjoyed this opening contest. As far as I'm concerned, these two wrestlers had fantastic chemistry, and I think we found another Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic, where whenever these two, Pete Dunne and Damien Priest, are in the ring, they just can't do no wrong. It's just awesome chemistry. And this was a fantastic match, a great way to kick off the show. But the action didn't end there. Before Pete Dunne could even have a chance to celebrate, Killian Dane came into the ring, attacked Pete Dunne from the outside, and then he attacked Damien Priest on the outside, giving him a running cannonball into the steel steps. And it looks like we've possibly got a tasty three-way on our hands for a future episode of NXT, or they might kind of move it onto the TakeOver card. But what were your thoughts of this match, and what transpired afterwards, Kurt?
Pete's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, he can't do no wrong. To me, nobody cared about Punishment Martinez. I'm sorry. Like, to me, nobody cared about him. The presentation and how he's worked since going to NXT has been one of the most improved wrestlers of this year. I love his entrance. And you said it, the chemistry between Dunn and Priest. And I think Dunn's been able to showcase how good Priest actually is. He's not just a big guy. You mentioned his athleticism. He's got great striking combinations. I think it was about 4 kicks, a few strikes, and then like the big strike at the end to drop Dunn. I'm really liking what Damien Priest is doing. And then throwing Killian Dane back in there, he's in great shape now, from especially what he used to be in for the UK independent scene. And either combination of that, a three-way, how the singles would work, Dane versus Dunn, Dane versus Priest, great way to kick off for a first match. And to follow the opening, they needed something special, and them two delivered.
Oh, yeah, in spades. We then reminded that the team captains for the first ever women's Wargames match have chosen their first two teammates, with Shayna Baszler choosing Io Shirai and Bianca Belair, and Rhea Ripley chooses Tegan Nox and Candice LeRae. So we'll talk more about that match a bit later on. Then we get a match between Santana Garrett and Tainara. So this was Santana's NXT debut, although I do remember her being a competitor in the 2018 Mae Young Classic. Santana nearly had this match won after a handspring moonsault press, which was cleverly avoided by her opponent, enabling Tainara to connect with a decent-looking running step-up knee strike for the win there. And then we got Dakota Kai versus Shayna Baszler. Now, in this match, Baszler goes after Dakota's heavily braced right leg with a knee bar and a huge stomp to the knee. Baszler gets a 2 count from a gut-wrench superplex off the middle turnbuckle. Both women fight it out toe for toe and kick for kick. Dakota is able to fight her way out of Shayna's Karafuda clutch on the first attempt, but not when the move was reapplied a second time, with Dakota tapping out after a spirited fight from the captain of Team Kick. But things soon break down after the match, when the horsewomen come into the ring to beat down Dakota before Tegan Nox and Rhea Ripley come out along with Candice LeRae. However, they're ambushed on the rampway by their Wargames opponents Bianca Belair and Io Shirai. Mia Yim then comes out to make the save with a kendo stick in hand. She takes care of business. So this was a really good fun segment after quite a good match, with the ending possibly leading us to believe that Mia Yim could be added as the fourth member to Rhea Ripley's Wargames team. So just your thoughts, Kurt, on the match, and how good a job you think they're doing building towards the first ever women's Wargames match.
I'm excited. Part of me's scared. I love Tegan Nox. I really do. When she was on the the Independents, massive fan. And it's the Daniel Bryan effect. When Daniel Bryan first came back, I cringed at every single match. And I've got the same with Tegan. And with the Wargames, I'm just praying she doesn't get hurt again. But I think that match will help me get away from my fear of her getting injured. But yeah, Shayna Baszler is an absolute megastar. She's the best women's wrestler WWE have got, in my opinion. Especially at the moment, I think she's the hottest. Dakota Kai, it's great to see back. And even the match prior with Tanara Conte and Santana Garrett, I think Tanara's somebody that could really build behind. And I was just having a look, and Santana, I think it's her like 5th appearance on NXT television, actually. She faced Asuka back in 2016 and Emma. And it's good to see. She's always had these sporadic appearances, and it'll be interesting to see if they're going to do anything with her, or if it was just another we'll sign her so somebody else can't.
Yeah, I get the feeling they're going to do a bit more with her. I mean, she's got a good look. She put in some good moves against Tainara, and it was a fairly good match for what it was. Could have gone either way, but I think we're going to see a bit more from Santana Garrett. The next match was really good, really interesting. Tony Nese versus Angel Garza. So Angel Garza, now a babyface, going up against former Cruiserweight champion Tony Nese, with the winner to face NXT Cruiserweight champion Lio Rush on a future episode. And I think it's announced later on in the show that match will take place next week. This match was full of excellent action from these two highly talented wrestlers. There was so much great action, including tornado DDT from Nese off the ring apron to the floor, as well as a close near fall from a 450 splash from Tony Nese. Garza gets the win in this one and to become the number one contender from his wing clipper finishing move. So both of these two are just so smooth in the ring, Kurt. Angel Garza has to be one of the revelations of 2019 as far as I'm concerned. I'll be honest, I preferred him a little bit when he showed his more cocky heel side. He's showing more babyface elements at the moment. But if they allow him to build his character, I think he could be a really big star in the future. But what were your thoughts on kind of this match? And just before I hand over to you, kind of at the end of the match, Lio Rush and Angel Garza did have a little bit of a face-to-face on the stageway, and Lio Rush put his hand out for a friendly sportsman handshake, but Angel Garza just slapped him around the face before walking off the stage. But a good match and a good way to build up to Angel Garza's confrontation for the Cruiserweight Championship against Rush.
Yeah, I'm so glad that the NXT it's now the NXT Cruiserweight division.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be showcased so much better with that. Tony Nese is just an absolute specimen, and it'll be interesting to see how NXT will book somebody of his abilities. But Angel Garza, absolutely love him. Was a big fan of his work in Impact Wrestling when he was Hector Garza Jr. You're right, the cockiness, and I was so glad when he did the slap to Leo Rush. I'm like, yes, this is, to me, he's a lot like Almas. Is a more cruiserweight version of Andrade.
Yeah.
And to see where Garza goes, he can talk. He's got the looks. He's got the ability, and I think he could be an absolute megastar, especially under Triple H's guidance in NXT.
Yeah, agreed. Let's answer some more questions then. So we got some questions from Chris Martin. Now, Chris occasionally jumps on the podcast and helps us to review pay-per-view shows. But Chris's first question is, what do I believe is the match of the year so far? Well, there's only one answer as far as I'm concerned. It's from NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff, and it has to be Walter versus Tyler Bate for the WWE United Kingdom Championship. That match went 42 minutes. Easily a 5-star match as far as I was concerned. I was there, saw it in the flesh. I've seen it a dozen times or more back on the network ever since. But match of the year so far has to go to Walter versus Tyler Bate. What's your match of the year so far, Kurt?
It was a difficult one. Like, that match was fantastic. But whereas you was watching that live, I was watching Okada and Suzuki.
Yeah.
And this is why I'll say there's 3 matches where I can't there's that one with Okada and Suzuki, basically because I went in there saying, well, it'll be a good match, but it's pointless. We know Okada's winning. And they managed to make me believe Suzuki was going to win that title. They had me jumping on the seat when he was trying to do the Gotch power drive. It's just like, sit down. So for me, that match was outstanding. Shingo Takagi versus Will Ospreay, Best of Super Juniors final, was absolutely incredible. And one of them that I actually saw live as well, and it will be on probably nobody's list, Rampage Brown versus Shuji Ishikawa at WrestleGate. And it was when they were doing the Emerald Grand Prix. Rampage and Ishikawa, that match was absolutely brutal. And it's potentially one of the best matches I've seen live ever.
Wow, high praise. Chris then goes on to ask, what one question would you like to ask Vince McMahon? So my one question would be, when are you going to get rid of all the script writers and let the wrestlers do their own promos? But I don't think that's ever likely to happen. But what about yourself, Kurt? If you had a chance to meet Vinnie Mac, what would you ask him?
Well, Vince is a chaotic genius. Although I don't like the main products, to say he's not a genius and after what he's built would be a lie. I'd ask him what his biggest regret is. It'd be interesting for somebody so powerful and so successful with such controversy in wrestling, what his biggest regret in wrestling is.
Yeah, decent question there. Chris then asks, if you were able to eliminate someone from a battle royal, who would you eliminate? I'll probably eliminate Vince McMahon, actually, going back to the 99 Royal Rumble and stop him from winning the Rumble in 99. So a lot of my answers are going to revolve around Vince McMahon as far as Chris's questions are concerned. But yeah, I would eliminate Vince McMahon from the 99 Royal Rumble to prevent him from winning that match. But what about yourself, buddy?
Mine would be Kofi Kingston. The reason being, Kofi always does amazing stuff to stay in the Rumble. I want to walk out that Rumble the biggest friggin' heel going. So as Kofi lands and does something to stop himself from being eliminated, I'm not going to stand there and watch looking gormless. I'll go through the middle rope so I'm not eliminated, and I'll stop whatever he's doing to make sure his feet touch the ground. I'm going to get booed out of the building. I'll get back in. I don't care if I get thrown out, because then it'll be a massive pop. It'll be really entertaining. But ultimately, I've ruined everyone's fun because Kofi's not done his great escape.
Awesome. And then Chris goes on to ask, if you had the opportunity to call any match in history with any announcer, who would it be and what match? So I've got that I'd call the 92 Royal Rumble with Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. I think that the commentary from that show, from the Royal Rumble match itself, is possibly, it goes down as possibly some of the best work from a commentary team ever, as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely love it. And it really helps to build the legacy of that match itself. The match was fantastic. The commentary really added to it. But I'd like to be part of that commentary team for the 92 Royal Rumble. But what about yourself? If you had the opportunity to call any match with any announcer, then Kurt?
I'd call it with JR, just because the two matches would be relevant. It'd be Rock and Austin, WrestleMania 17, and it'd be Rock and Hogan, WrestleMania 18, because they're my two absolute favourite matches of all time. They're not the best technically, but for what I grew up and what I remember, they're my two favourite matches.
Brilliant. And one more question from Ditz. It's another podcaster, Ditz on Wrestling, and he's asked, what is your favourite gimmick match? And for me, sticking to a bit of a theme, I suppose, but having given this quite a bit of thought, I've got to say that my favourite gimmick match is the Royal Rumble. I love the surprise entrance. I love the drama to see who's coming out next. I love the returning legends coming out, the storylines that build throughout the match, and most of all to see what WrestleMania matches might come out of it, what pairings might kind of come out of it from the match itself that could possibly go on to be a WrestleMania match, and of course see who wins to headline for a championship at WrestleMania itself. So I've got to say, for all of them reasons, it's the Royal Rumble as far as I'm concerned. But what say you?
100% agree. Royal Rumble, one of my favourite times of the year. The gimmick match is incredible. A notable shout out to the Ultimate X match as well. I think that's incredible, especially when they don't use the ladders. I think that needs a noticeable shout out, but Royal Rumble, hands down.
Superb. Going back to NXT then, we get some backstage footage of Rhea Ripley, who chooses her final member of Wargames, and as we suspected, it is Mia Yim with a dejected Dakota Kai telling Rhea that she sees how it is before she walks off. And then we get our next match. Isiah Swerve Scott versus Dominic Dijakovic. So Swerve gets a close near fall in this match from a DDT, appearing to spike Dijakovic on the top of his head. Swerve is able to reverse a feast your eyes into a roll up for a 2 count. Dijakovic does get a close near fall from a big boot and then a choke bomb on Isiah Scott. Dijakovic gets spiked on his head again, this time from a poison Rana before another close near fall from a huge 360 lariat from Scott. Scott does he goes on a bit of a rampage towards the end of the match, as a matter of fact, looking like he might steal the win here. However, Dijakovic pulls off the win with his Feast Your Eyes. So these two, once again, we go back to Pete Dunne and Damien Priest having great chemistry. These two, I don't know how many times they've touched in the ring before this match, but these two had amazing chemistry as well. And it's a real display of moves from Isiah Scott, probably more than we've seen since he's made his debut on NXT. Another fun match, Kurt, and I'd love to see these two go at it again. To be honest with you, we seem to be seeing a lot of really good pairings on NXT that do really well, that you can be more than happy to see more than once. But what were your thoughts on this match? And I mean, just another thought of mine is I think this extra hour of NXT is really giving a lot of a lot more and maybe newer wrestlers, new NXT wrestlers, a real chance to shine, whereas they may not have had the opportunity to before. So whereas a lot of people were quite skeptical when NXT were given the second hour on the USA Network, I think it's really working a treat. But what say you? What's your thoughts, buddy?
Regarding the 2 hours, 100%. I was telling one of my buddies that's kind of got out of touch with wrestling about NXT and AEW, and he was like, it's better than 3 hours, it sounds it. I was like, but NXT and AEW could do 3 hours and it'd still be a lot better because the content that's being delivered is fantastic. These two absolutely killed it. Isiah, glad he's in WWE. He's so good. But Dijakovic, he's took it to another level. And I think he was kind of just floating around a little bit until the Keith Lee stuff. And since that Keith Lee match, he can do no wrong. And he, like, I can't express like how far Dijakovic is going to go. I can see him being a challenger for the NXT title in the near future.
I hope so.
He can do no wrong at the moment. And again, I'd like to see them go again. And I think that's the case with anybody because the talent pool in NXT is so good. it'd be really difficult to have a poor pairing.
Yeah, you just want to see more from all of this. I just absolutely love it at the moment. But a really good match between those two. Before the main event, it is announced that Mia Yim will take on Io Shirai on next week's NXT. And it's going to be in a ladder match with the winner of the match getting the advantage for their respective Wargames team. Obviously, having the first a second partner to go into. They'll start one-on-one, and then it goes staggered, where each team will have their next person go in. And the winner of that match next week will have the advantage in the Wargames match when it takes place on the 23rd of November. And then on to the main event. So it was teased at the beginning, it was announced at the beginning that the OC, Gallows, Anderson and AJ Styles will take on Tommaso Ciampa, Matt Riddle and Keith Lee. So after a big brawl around the ring, all six wrestlers, Ciampa nearly gets an early 2 count on AJ Styles from his Willow's Bell. So that's his draping DDT that he does, and he kind of hit it straight off the back there on AJ Styles. But after Tommaso takes a beating, Matt Riddle gets the hot tag, taking the fight to all three members of the OC, including some Brotons, an exploder suplex, soccer kicks, a delayed German suplex, a flash knee strike, and a bridging German on AJ for the 2 count. Styles drops Lee with the DDT before nailing Riddle with a brainbuster for a close near fall. The closing sequence of this match saw Keith Lee sending AJ Styles flying into the referee with a huge pounce before clotheslining Anderson over the ropes to the outside. Riddle then delivers a backflip over the top of his opponent onto the floor. Ciampa then connects with a running knee to the face of AJ, but before he could deliver his fairy tale ending, we get the music of Finn Balor, who drops Riddle on the outside with his Bloody Sunday DDT, before Finn looks into the ring at AJ, with Finn showing his showing AJ his Prince Devitt's double gun pose, and AJ signals back with his too sweet. Styles is about to finish Ciampa off with a Stars Clash when Adam Cole comes into the ring to attack Styles with a super kick before dropping Ciampa with a last shot. As the show goes off the air, we got Balor and Cole staring at each other, leaving the fans to wonder what next. And what role will Balor take as we get closer to TakeOver, and will he play a part in that show? So a bit of a chaotic main event. Like I say, it was excellent while it lasted. And then you had the introduction of Finn Balor, and then you had the surprise appearance from Adam Cole. So it was all going off. I don't think we had a decisive conclusion to the match. But what were your thoughts on this excellent closing segment and main event, Kurt?
Well, you've just made me want to watch the match again, to be honest. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Before I go into it, you mentioned the Io Shirai match next week. I just can't wait for Wargames to see Io Shirai hit the best moonsault in the business off the frigging cage.
Wow.
It's going to be a thing of beauty. But this match, it's the OC that we've been wanting. It's the Gallows, Anderson and Styles that we've been wanting since they frigging debuted. And the fact that those three turned up was the best possibility, and it was great to see them, dare I say, without the shackles on.
Yeah.
And the match was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I want to see Styles and Ciampa. It's finishing on a cliffhanger. It's finishing on cliffhangers, and that's what wrestling used to be about. Wrestling used to be about leaving you excited so you can't wait to see what happens next week, not just a generic finish. And each week, I'm like, they can't top that. And they friggin' top it. Like, they've been knocking it out of the park at the moment. And there's so many variables, like you said, what's next? Cole and Balor. You've got Balor and Gargano happening. Is Balor going to finally team in an 8-man tag match with Styles, Gallows, Anderson? What's going to happen? There's so much variables, and it's brilliant to be a wrestling fan right now.
It really is, and like you said at the beginning, it was good to see them wrestle without the shackles, and even AJ Styles looked like he was wrestling with quite a bit of freedom there, to be honest with you. It reminded me of when he was wrestling back in the old TNA days. He really was. It looked like he was having fun and enjoying it in the ring without being restricted under the watch of Vince McMahon, you could say. But did you get the same impression?
Yeah, 100%. It's, for me, all of this has made Survivor Series worthwhile. Survivor Series has been poor for the past few years. And if we're getting this every year, a mini invasion angle all the time, hands down. And it's so good because what's the possibilities? all the other people that you know can absolutely deliver. What happens if Daniel Bryan or Seth Rollins goes to NXT or NXT TakeOver to have a match, and those shackles come off because it isn't Vince dictating how they can do a match? And obviously he has to dictate because they've got sponsorships and they've got the audience, and that's why they're making so much money. But it makes it possible for people to go to NXT to have those killer dream matches. And yeah, I want to see more of AJ Styles, Gallows, and Anderson on NXT.
Yeah, definitely. And then it's confirmed that the men's Wargames match is going to be the Undisputed Era versus Tommaso Ciampa, Matt Riddle, Keith Lee, and one other wrestler yet to be announced. So that looks a really tasty match. Can't wait for that one. It's going to be really fun. I mean, we've seen a lot of NXT on Raw, SmackDown, and of course the show every Wednesday. And then to think on the 23rd and 24th of this month, we're going to have TakeOver Wargames and NXT show, of course. And then the following night, more NXT on Survivor Series. So, it's the roster, it's the brand that we can't get enough of, and we're going to have plenty to get our eyes around throughout this month. But yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. But before we go into AEW Dynamite, Kurt, let's answer some more questions, shall we? So let's have a look, see who's up next. We got there we go. Ashley Clements with a question: which wrestler or wrestlers have impressed you this year that you've seen in person? So crikey, have you got an answer to this one? Which wrestlers have impressed you that you've seen in person?
For new wrestlers, okay, so obviously every time I see Rampage Brown, I'm blown away. He's the best wrestler in Europe, in my opinion. But for those that I've not seen much of until this year, Karen Noir, he's been absolutely incredible. His entrance, the whole presentation, it's such an art form with him. I first saw him in WrestleGate Lion Spirit against Bad Bones John Klinger in a match where it made me wince quite a lot. Like, it made me cringe because I thought he's going to kill himself. And he was absolutely fantastic. And then for me, Karen Noir and Scotty Davis stole the show for the Still Chasing and Natural Progression weekend for Progress.
Yeah.
He was absolutely phenomenal then. And obviously, Still Chasing got to face Pete Dunne. So for me, Karen Noir, and somebody that I think's a sleeper pick would be Joe Nelson. Joe Nelson in the North is, I think, 17, maybe 18, and he's doing some fantastic stuff. I saw him at Fight Club Pro I think it might have been last month for the Project Mayhem, and he was just in like a filler multi-man match in the first show, but then on night 2 he teamed with the Besties in the World to face the Rascals, and it looked like he belonged at such a young age. Them two are the people that I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, for me, I've got to say it's the grizzled young veterans. I think Zach Gibson and James Drake, such great workers, so smooth as a team. They work so well as a team, and their double team moveset is the best in the business as far as I'm concerned. They are also two of the best heels in the business as well. So just love what they do inside the ring and outside the ring. But I just think they're so smooth, work so well as a team. But wrestlers that I've been impressed with this year live in person, I think those two are definitely up there for me. We got another question from Andy Walters this time. If you could create your own faction with wrestlers from any promotion, any era, who would be in it? So for me, I've got to look to some of my favourite wrestlers of all time, really. I think Vader would definitely be in there for the strength, for the size, for the power, his presence. Also part of that faction for me would be the loose cannon, Brian Pillman. I just think that his character, his unpredictability, what's he going to do next, completely off the wall, a brilliant wrestler. Will be greatly missed, and absolutely loved the loose cannon persona of Brian Pillman. Jake Roberts for his awesome interviews and mic work, menacing persona, and great wrestling ability in the ring, and that DDT that he could strike from out of nowhere. And I think adding somebody into the mix from the modern era, I would have to add Tommaso Ciampa. I think he would kind of complement the other three wrestlers that I've said. He's great on the mic, great in the ring, got a fantastic heel and babyface persona, although I did prefer him as a heel, to be honest with you. But yeah, Vader, Brian Pillman, Jake Roberts, and Tommaso Ciampa. But have you got a faction that you could create from any promotion, any era? Who would be in it, Kurt?
I'm going to kind of cheat and mix a couple of factions together. So I'd go for probably the Hart Foundation. I'd have, obviously, you've got Davey Boy, the British Bulldog. I'd have him and Dynamite Kid. I'd have Brian Pillman. You've got Owen Hart and Bret Hart, and obviously there's the Anvil. But the big thing that I wanted it is the British Bulldog and then David Boy Smith Jr. Have Brian Pillman and his son, Brian Pillman Jr. And the Dynamite Kid with his two nephews that are wrestling in the UK at the moment. And you could mix them with Teddy Hart, who's out, Owen Hart. I would like to see those two. I tweeted MLW when they asked who they wanted in the Hart Foundation, and I tweeted about the two nephews of Dynamite Kid just because of the relationship with Davey Boy Smith Jr., and that's the faction that I'd like to see at the moment.
Awesome. Yeah, I like your thinking there. Let's have a little look at this week's AEW Dynamite anyway. So this was another really stacked show from AEW, and the show kicked off with a match between the Bastard, Pac, or is it Park? I'm not sure. Even Jim Ross gets it wrong, versus Trent Beretta. So Beretta was accompanied to the ring, as always, by Chuck Taylor and Orange Cassidy, with Pac on course for his third match with Hangman Page at this Saturday's Full Gear. So Pac was vicious in his offense with a repeated use of the guardrails before connecting with a corkscrew plancher over the top ropes onto Beretta on the outside. Beretta demonstrates some of his own high-flying prowess with a tope con hilo onto Pac on the outside. Beretta does manage to get a couple of close near falls, one from a swinging tornado DDT. However, it was at the ending of the match that's caused quite a few raised eyebrows, Kurt, over the last 48 hours. Pac drops Beretta on the outside with a brainbuster before setting himself up on the top rope for the Black Arrow. Firstly, it looks as though Beretta has to shuffle himself into position to get ready for the move. And then after Pac connects with the Black Arrow, the referee fails to count the three after Beretta's shoulders appears to stay down. Pac transitions into the Rings of Saturn for the eventual submission victory. So what's your take on what happened here then, Kurt, at the end of the match? From my vantage point, or the viewer's vantage point watching on TV, it did look as though Beretta's shoulders were down and the referee should have counted the pin on the three. But what do you think on this one, and who's at fault?
It was frustrating to see, I guess, but it's one of those where human error does happen.
True.
For me, I think the referee should never stop the count. Responsibility is always on the people that are wrestling. If the referee's counting properly and he's having his arms stretched properly and he's doing the count, if the three's there, hit the three. Especially because it was a Black Arrow that he used. I think the reason why he won't have is obviously they're trying to get the submission move over at the moment. It was a weird one to see him kick out the Black Arrow, to be honest. Something was wrong. Something went wrong there, but to me, I still enjoyed it, but I don't think he should have ever kicked out of the Black Arrow anyways, because I think that move should be still killer.
Yeah, totally. After the match, Pac then cuts a promo on Hangman Page, telling him that he will make an example of him at Full Gear on Saturday. The other talking point coming out of this week's AEW Dynamite, Kurt, was Cody's promo, though. So directly after the first match, Cody came into the ring. He spoke about Dusty. Cody called AEW Ellis Island for professional wrestling, and that AEW is freedom. Cody announces that if he fails to beat Jericho on Saturday, that he will never challenge for the AEW World Championship again. Cody said that this match was not about the dead. It wasn't about his father, but it was about the living. It was about his mother. It was about his sister. It was about his wife, and it was about the 14 years to go from undesirable to ungoddamn deniable. Cody finished by saying that on Saturday he will become the AEW World Champion. So there's so much I left out there, but what an amazing promo from Cody. This is a match I'm really looking forward to, and even more so following this past Wednesday in that promo, mostly because of the build and the fantastic mic work and video packages that we've had to build up this world title match on Saturday. So what was your impression of what Cody had to say on Wednesday?
Goosebumps. There's a reason why All In's my favourite experience, and it's because of the story Cody can tell.
Yeah. And
Cody's speech and the way he carries himself. After All In, I did when he won the NWA title, I had a cigar with him and Kazarian, and even then, it was just like star power. and he looks like a champion. He acts like a champion. He's a megastar, and he's such a showman. The way he is really articulate and tells a story really well. And for me, that is how you hype for a pay-per-view. I think in terms of a go-home show, they've knocked out the park. They've hyped Full Gear amazingly. But Cody delivered a promo that will stand the test of time.
Shall I tell you what works for me? I mean, it's his emotion. There's always real, raw emotion whenever you've got Cody in the ring. When he cuts, he obviously has, his dad on his mind and his family. He's a very passionate family man. He's got a lot of legacy there with his father, with his brother. And it's the emotion, and you can feel that it's real when Cody cuts a promo. It's not scripted, it's all him, and it's all passion, it's all emotion. I think that's what works. And that going back to what we've always said, if WWE allowed their wrestlers to have a bit more freedom on the mic, I think that they'd get a few more results like this. But couldn't agree with you anymore. He knocked it out of the park and got us looking forward to that main event even more, to be honest with you.
And it deserves a recognition. Like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, he replied to the actual AEW tweet regarding it, and it's rhythm, cadence, tone, intent, passion, execution. Great promo, brother. You might drop that MF some motherfucker at Cody Rhodes. And that's coming from probably the greatest talker of all times, and Cody is outstanding. Yeah,
very impressed with that one. But like I said, I think it's the hype that the video packages, the other mic work that's happened in the lead up to Saturday's showdown between him and Jericho that's really worked and really sold us to that particular title match. But on to the next match, and it was Private Party versus the Dark Order. Now, the winner of this match will be added into a triple threat match to go up against SCU, who's the current AEW World Champion, Tag Team Champions, and the Lucha Brothers at Full Gear, so turn it into a three-way. So this was a really fun match, so many high spots from both teams. Many thought that the match was won by the Dark Order after they hit their running cannonball in 450 for a very, very close near fall. However, the ending wasn't too far away as the infectious duo of Mark Quinn and Isiah Cassidy combined well with their gin and juice double team finisher for the win, and to enter themselves into the triple threat for the AEW Tag Team Championships, pitting obviously champions SCU and number one contenders Lucha Brothers. So Private Party have gate crashed the party on Saturday then, Kurt. So a pretty good match. I thought that these two worked quite well together. It's a shame that they're kind of not doing as much with the Dark Order. I know it's early days, but they kind of got a bye into the tournament straight through to the semi-final, and then they lost that match, which was quite surprising. But what were your thoughts on these two teams and how the match went down?
Private Party have been one of the biggest surprises. They've been booked so good, and I feel that they're in the match because they'll blend a lot better with Lucha Bros and SCU. I think if Dark Order was in the match, it'd slow the match down, and I think they're just going to go balls to the wall. An amazing triple threat match this weekend. It's a shame they've not done much with Dark Order. I thought they were going to be an absolute dominant tag team.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll tell that story where they've not really been that dark. So hopefully they snap sooner rather than later and then just run roughshod. But the tag division in AEW right now is outstanding.
It really is. Yeah, like I said, it's completely stacked, and I thought it was demonstrative during the tag team tournament how good it was and what great matches we had on offer. But I mean, they could have an entire pay-per-view full of excellent tag team wrestling as far as I'm concerned. They really do have some excellent teams and a great roster to pick from. We then get quite an interesting hype video from Le Champion, Chris Jericho, which was full of humour and was almost a bit of a Spinal Tap of wrestling hype videos, to be honest with you. We had words from Sammy Guevara, Soul Train Jones, the former Virgil from WWF. We even had Chris Jericho's auntie And a rather silent Jake Hager, who of course hasn't said a word yet, and he didn't say a word during this promo either. This video, I did laugh out loud when I saw this. To be honest with you, Kurt, where we've had a very emotional, very passionate speeches and promos from Cody Rhodes. This video package, was almost the opposite of all of those, but got exactly the same result and made us look forward to his match with Cody even more. But this was a bit of a laugh out loud moment. I'm sure it was intended to be more on the kind of slapstick side, but what about yourself? Did you get a little bit of a chuckle out of this one?
Yeah, just seeing Virgil on there made me laugh. Like, it is Virgil, and I thought it was like, I'm sure the old woman was Jericho's aunt's friend from church.
Oh, is that right? Sorry, yes.
I'm sure it was Jericho's aunt's friend from church.
You're right now, yes.
It was just completely bonkers, but again, absolutely brilliant. And the thing that stood out for me was Jericho kissing Sammy Guevara on the head. Like, I love that. Sammy Guevara is a born heel. Jericho can get him to where he needs to be. And I always like when they get legends to speak about people. So it was interesting seeing Virgil. Hopefully we don't see much of Virgil much more after that. But
agreed.
It was. The hype packages are great for what AEW are doing, and the promo works are great. They're very creative, and I'm liking it.
Yeah, agreed. Then we get a match pitting Jamie Hayter and Emi Sakura versus Shana and Rihu. So if I can get my lips around those names, this was a fine match. What it was, we even got a double wet willy from Jamie Hayter on the AEW Women's Champion, which was quite amusing. We got a brilliant action from all four women in this match, but the end of the match came following a series of pinning attempts between Rihu and Sakura, with Rihu getting with Rihu getting pinned by her Full Gear opponent Emi Sakura. So perfectly setting up their match on Saturday, Kurt. Now, I know that you've been a big champion, a big proponent of women's wrestling for many years now, but what were your thoughts on these four wrestlers in this match and how it went down, and how do you think it sets up their championship match on Saturday, buddy?
Sets it up well. I think with the type of pin, it's showing the teacher is still the master there, not the student who's the champion. Obviously, Emi Sakura teaching like the trainer of Riho back in Japan.
Yeah.
The fact that Shana has been signed by AEW shows a sign of intent of listening to fans. She got an amazing reaction the week prior, so great to see she's signed. They've recently just signed Big Swole as well. They did that backstage on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
I think after a dark match. But I think with Jamie Hayter is fantastic as well. And I hope they sign Jamie Hayter down to the contract. There's so much depth. And I'm looking forward to the story that Riho and Emi Sakura can tell. Don't know how the crowd will get behind it, because Sakura tried doing her "We Will Rock You" kind of hype bit, and there was some boos. There weren't that hype that I think they was expecting. It'll be interesting the way it'll go. But in terms of in-ring quality, Full Gear is going to be fantastic with them too.
Agreed. Then we get a match between Brandon Cutler and the chairman of AEW, Sean Spears. So Sean Spears pretty much decimated Brandon Cutler in this match, winning the match in pretty quick fashion with a running Death Valley driver. After the match, Spears was about to drop Cutler for a second time on a steel chair, only to have bad boy Joey Janela race out to make the save, setting up a potential feud between Janela and Sean Spears for a later date. So I don't know if it's been announced as to whether these two will be fighting at Full Gear. Let's just check the list of matches. It is now there on the card, yeah. So that'll be quite a good match. Looking forward to that one. But has Sean Spears lived up to your expectations since joining AEW? I mean, he's not been very successful, not been on the winning side much, but he's still got, quite a bit more presence and a bit more importance about him since joining the brand.
Yeah, I'm glad the way they're booking him. They're not doing what TNA did, where it's a WWE guy that went main event, he's going straight to the main event. So I'm glad. And this change of character is such a completely different change to the Perfect 10. And I'm loving that Tully's by him. So I think they're just building and building and building. Cody recently said in an interview that over the next month or two, they'll be probably introducing, doesn't want to call it a mid-card title because he thinks that's a detriment. It should be a title that rises up.
Yeah.
But I think that's where he'll shine. I think he'd be a great champion for those that are under the main event scene. And I think having a good run with that, with Tully by his side, could be what elevates him to the main event picture. I'm loving the chairman stuff. I think that was a happy coincidence with the chair shot being a little bit too brutal than it was supposed to be. But it was a happy coincidence. Cody's okay. And he's just got something that fits. It doesn't feel forced. It works with him.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm looking forward to his match with Janela on Saturday. On to the next set of questions then, Kurt. So Jason Lee Wood, he asks, knowing the mess that Seth is currently in, the You're Not Cool Seth, so getting quite a few boos, and how Becky isn't as hot as she was last year at Survivor Series, when was the last time WWE got a wrestler over intentionally? So I've got here that it's possibly been a very long time. I mean, the wrestlers that I've got down here that they've possibly got over, you could consider maybe Roman Reigns in there, maybe Ronda Rousey, but what about the Fiend? I know the Fiend is, he was a bit of a hit from day one, but he's still a kind of a WWE gimmick, you could say, might have been manifested from the rather deranged mind of Bray Wyatt. Yeah, I mean, if you think of any wrestlers that WWE have intentionally got over instead of it being more organic and fan-based.
Fiend was also on my list. And the only other thing that I could think of is Seth Rollins' heel turn.
Yeah,
when
true.
Seth Rollins turned on the Shield, then during that dynamic, Seth Rollins was the one people weren't paying attention to as much. Then that heel turn was what made Seth Rollins to what he is now, which is one of the biggest stars in the company. So I think they need credit for that. But I think the struggle, I think fans are partly to blame. You said Roman Reigns getting over. Roman Reigns was over. I remember people booing Batista because Roman Reigns didn't win the Rumble. So then WWE like, okay, we'll give you what you want. And then people start booing Roman Reigns. And I think it's a case of, we want you to push him. Oh, actually, no, you're pushing him too much. And we're in that sort of environment now where people... It's hard to please a wrestling fan.
It really is. Even when they give you what you want, we always still find a way to complain about it. But yes, we are very difficult to please. But on to part two of Jason's question. Why was the Attitude Era so popular, and why isn't WWE reaching those previous heights? Or maybe they are, and you totally disagree. What do you think? So about the Attitude Era. So I've got a couple of responses to Jason's question. Firstly, I think one of the main reasons why the WWE, why the Attitude Era was so popular was Stone Cold Steve Austin. He resonated with the everyman. He resonated with so many millions of fans out there. He was the anti-establishment, the anti-authority figure. Delivered brilliant promos, had that iconic look, that attitude. But I think around that time, WWE, they were pushed into a situation where they had to create new stars and let the personalities, let the stars be themselves. Much of the Attitude Era has been kind of over-romanticized as far as I'm concerned. However, when you look back at the characters and some of the iconic matches and memories from 20 plus years ago, the Attitude Era may never be repeated. The WWE won't necessarily go back to them heights unless they allow their wrestlers to talk for themselves. You only have to look at the freedom that AEW and AEW wrestlers are given on the mic, and we sort of spoke about that earlier. And AEW, of course, is the cool kid on the block at the moment. And now there is that sense, with that competition of AEW being around at the moment and WWE, we've noticed the quality of the programming in getting better, or certainly heading in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. So I don't think we'll ever see the heights of the Attitude Era again, but I think that element of competition, things are definitely stepping up. And I think if they were just allowed to loosen the reins a little bit on some of the wrestlers, giving them a bit more freedom, allowing them to be themselves instead of more of a generic promos or scripted, I think that things could get a bit more interesting in the future. But what are your thoughts on Jason's question there about the Attitude Era, and will they ever reach them heights again?
I love Attitude Era. But it depends what you think heights are. In terms of WWE, they've surpassed the Attitude Era. The profits are higher than what Attitude Era was. they've got more sponsors than Attitude Era was, and they're getting more money on their TV deals. So in terms of them, financially, they're at the greatest height that compared to the Attitude Era. But in terms of like product delivery, obviously they're not there. I don't think they can get to those heights though, because it's, to me, society's changed. Society's changed, so you can't have that product as edgy. I think with so much politically correct and people being offended a lot easier and things like that can play a factor into it. And I think it's just the landscape's changed. The internet wasn't a big thing. People are like, oh, that was predictable, knew that was going to happen. Well, if you're reading the dirt sheets 24/7, then you're going to know what's going to happen. And that's, the internet is what is, I think, making it not as hyped. And I think with the landscape with UFC's grown massively, and a lot of those wrestling fans have gone to UFC and they're liking the mixed martial arts a lot more. And he's mentioned edgier products in AEW, NXT. They're both still hitting under 1 million. And each week their views are decreasing. So I just don't know if that audience is there anymore.
Yeah, you make some good points, but I do think WWE have the potential to be a little bit edgier. I mean, they're trying some storylines that aren't quite hitting the spot at the moment, but I think that when you look at NXT, that's the slightly edgier product, and that seems to be getting over more with the fans.
Yeah,
and that's certainly what's hitting the spot as far as I'm concerned, anyway. But back to AEW, and let's talk about the main event of this week's shows: Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page versus Sammy Guevara and Le Champion Chris Jericho. I can't say it as well as he does, Kurt, but
Le Champion.
Maybe I need a little bit of the bubbly to get my vocal cords working. But this was a really fun match to cap off this week's episode of Dynamite, with Jericho getting the pinfall after interference from Pac with a low blow to Adam Page on the ring apron, allowing Jericho to deliver his Judas effect, hooking the leg and getting the 1-2-3. So this was a fun way to cap off the tag match. However, the action wasn't over there, as all 5 members of the Inner Circle start to beat down on Hangman before Cody races to the ring to clear Guevara from the ring with a uppercut. Jericho retreats away from the ring, but not before MJF comes from behind to drop Jack Hager and Jericho with chair shots on the rampway, allowing Cody to hit his crossroads on Le Champion, seemingly to put an end to the show. However, from out of the crowd, Jon Moxley came with a barbed wire baseball bat in hand and had a bit of a face-off with Kenny Omega. MJF brawls with Jack Hager on the outside. Santana and Ortiz, they rush the ring only to be chased down by the Young Bucks, and Jericho drags Cody over the top rope and out of the ring. Mox and Omega then battle to the back. Then we see Nick Jackson dive off of the staging onto all of the heels down below, and that was an intense brawl and ended the show on a real high heading into Saturday's pay-per-view. So a pretty good match for what it was, but it's going to be remembered for the kind of shenanigans and all the beatdowns and brawling that happened afterwards. But much like how NXT went off the air this week, AEW did something similar. And it was a bit of a fun, wild brawl to cap things off. But give us your thoughts on that closing match and that closing segment then, Kurt.
The biggest thing I'm impressed about with AEW is how intertwining the storylines are, and it's not being forced. So you've got the history of Omega and Page both losing to Jericho, and that's why Jericho's champion. And you mentioned with the Inner Circle being around there, you had Moxley and Omega going at it, but then Santana and Ortiz stopped them from fighting. And then as they're trying to do the powerbomb on the stage to the Young Bucks, it's as if Moxley and Omega work together to take out Santana Ortiz. And then I love the bit where it's like, right, that's done, me and you now. And then they start brawling away. And it's just good to see all these. You've got the Inner Circle, you've got the Elite, but then you've got the offshoot of Cody and his friend with MJF. And I just love how everything's intertwining organically. And a couple of times, they get the crowd so hyped up, and then they die down. Then Moxley comes out, gets so hyped up, then it dies down because they're having that standoff on the stage, and then they run at each other again. And it's just waves of emotion constantly because they're letting you calm down, and then bang, here we go again. And to me, it's exciting television, and that's how you build to a pay-per-view. That's how you go home for a pay-per-view.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I were to put you on the spot, like I like to ask my guest host every single week, which of the two shows would you say was the better show? You obviously had NXT with the OC showing up and that brilliant opening segment. You had Dunn versus Priest and that main event match between the OC, Tommaso Ciampa, Matt Riddle, and Keith Lee, and the whole closing segment. And then, of course, with AEW, you had a few good matches there, but you had that excellent promo from Cody, that video package from Chris Jericho, and that wild main event. So, what would you say was your favourite match of the week? What was the best match, show of the week? Sorry.
Why did I have to come on this week?
They were both good. They were both awesome.
Yeah. I think for terms of in-ring quality and the quality throughout the show has to go to NXT. But then with the Cody promo and the way they AEW closed, they were two of the highest points as well. I'd have to go with NXT, but Cody and the way Elite and Inner Circle closed is up there with what essentially the OC, Undisputed Era, and everybody did. But overall, NXT has to win.
Yeah, I think for the reason you mentioned about AEW has to be the reason why I'm going to vote AEW this week. I just found that Cody promo, the kind of funny Chris Jericho video package. I just found that the matches weren't. The in-ring action wasn't as good on AEW compared to NXT, but I felt as a go-home show to get you hyped and looking forward to the pay-per-view, I felt they did everything that was necessary. And I think that Cody promo kind of tipped it over the edge for me and made it the show of the week for me. So I'm going to side against you on this occasion and say AEW, but it was very, very close. You're probably talking 49-51 there.
I agree with your thoughts. Like, in-ring NXT win, storyline and prepping for the next show, AEW gets that win.
Agreed. So let's go on to our final set of questions before we talk about the Full Gear pay-per-view itself then. So we've got a question from Jason Hall, who asks, terrible wrestlers that you secretly loved. He gives an example of Sid. Terrible wrestlers I secretly loved back in the day has to be, firstly, the Warlord. I think I've mentioned him on this podcast before. I just loved his look. But I thought I loved the big guys. I mean, Vince McMahon obviously was doing something right when he was trying to push and promote all the big guys. They couldn't wrestle a lick, but they certainly looked great and menacing. I loved his kind of Phantom of the Opera silver mask and his big shoulder pads, and not that he needed them, to be honest with you. The other wrestler that was terrible, but I absolutely loved was Crush. Now this was kind of post Demolition Crush when he was introduced as Kona Crush, and I thought, the big guy, good looking, did some vignettes before they introduced him for his first match, and he didn't quite deliver in the ring, to be honest with you. I kind of looked at him, I thought, maybe he could be the next Hulk Hogan. He's kind of got the size, he's 6'5", 6'6", built quite well, looks good, but it didn't quite deliver when the bell rang. But what about yourself? Any terrible wrestlers that you secretly loved?
Eva Marie.
Right.
Loved Eva Marie. Not going to lie. Somebody that does get called terrible was Scott Steiner. And people slated his WWE run where he came back and stuff like that and his feud with Triple H. I loved Scott Steiner. I still enjoy watching Scott Steiner. I don't know how he falls into the terrible category. A lot of people say he's terrible. I think that's BS if you watch any of his stuff before all the steroids and when it was him and Rick just tearing it up as a tag team.
Yeah.
But Eva Marie she's great. She should return.
Jason also asks, make a WWE Hall of Fame class for 2020, so for next year, ahead of next year's WrestleMania, of course. And I've got quite an interesting set of wrestlers. Well, not interesting, I suppose a lot of them are quite obvious choices, but certainly the British Bulldog, I think it's long overdue. He should be going in there, and I wouldn't mind him going in there with Tom Billington, the Dynamite Kid, and putting them in as a tag team. Vader, long overdue, should have gone in when he was still alive, but a massive fan of Vader, big Van Vader. Love him to go into the WWE Hall of Fame. Bam Bam Bigelow, Bam Bam Bigelow, another big man that could move around the ring. and where you had Vader on WCW TV, the equivalent that WWE had at the time was Bam Bam Bigelow. Absolutely loved him. Another wrestler, well, not a wrestler, but she was a big part of the rock and wrestle period back in the mid '80s. But I'm surprised that Cyndi Lauper hasn't gone in as a WWE Hall of Famer, considering the exposure that she gave to wrestling back in the mid '80s. She was a big part of WrestleMania 1 and a big part of that kind of rock and wrestle kind of era, you could say. And the obvious one, of course, is Owen Hart. Whether we'll ever see Owen in the Hall of Fame or not is yet to be seen, but I think he is kind of top of most people's lists, but would love to see the King of Hearts get in there one day. But what about yourself, Kurt, the Hall of Fame class for 2020?
Very similar, actually. I had Owen, I had Davey, I had Tom Billington, so I had those three. I've also got, and people are going to hate me for this, Nikki and Brie Bella. For what they did during the Diva era of women's wrestling, can't go untested. Like, the merch sales, the TV shows, they had such an impact on so many younger women. I think they deserve to be in it. And then two others, I've got Ken Shamrock.
Yeah.
And the person that gave him, like, The Rock. The Rock's headlining. But, yeah, Ken Shamrock deserves to be in that. And as a side note, I love seeing him in Impact Wrestling.
Yeah. Awesome. Final question from Jason Hall then. So which commentary duo was better? Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon, Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, or JR and Lawler? So for what it's worth, I've gone for Gorilla and Heenan. You've got to think, I think that their glory year really as a commentary duo was 1992. You had the Royal Rumble 92 and then you had WrestleMania 8. And I thought that Heenan and Monsoon, the chemistry they had, the banter that they had, Gorilla constantly getting annoyed at Heenan, but it was just it was comedy genius and a really, really good time as a WWE fan, a WWF fan, and to be listening to those two on commentary. So I'm going to go with Gorilla and Bobby Heenan, mainly for the 91-92 era. So what about yourself? Out of them three sets of commentary teams, who would you go with?
As a duo, I went for the same. So Monsoon and Heenan, their chemistry was absolutely fantastic. Part of me wanted to go JR and Lawler, but I've never been the biggest fan of Lawler, if I'm being honest, with his commentary. I've loved what JR's done. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one, Monsoon and Heenan.
Excellent. Final set of questions from Everything Pro Wrestling Podcast. So they were kind enough to send us a couple of questions. Firstly, what are your expectations of AEW Full Gear? What will be the match of the night? So we're going to be talking more about that in a moment, but I'm really looking forward to the pay-per-view. I have purchased it on Fight TV. It's a very stacked card, as we'll get around to talking about in a minute. I'm expecting there to be some really hot matches. I'm particularly looking forward to the Young Bucks versus Santana and Ortiz. Looking forward to Omega and Moxley, and of course I think the highlight of the night is going to be Cody versus Jericho for the championship. What about yourself? What are your expectations of what will be the match of the night?
Well, it's going to be an amazing show, and my former brainbuster brother, I think it's an unfair question, to be honest, because the card is stacked. I'm looking forward to Cody and Jericho. I genuinely feel that match could give the same vibe as Cody and Aldis. Moxley and Omega are going to kill each other, which is going to be fun. And you've got the dream match in Bucks and LAX. Well, Proud and Powerful, they're called now. But for me, the match I'm looking forward to most is Cody and Jericho.
Yeah, agreed. And final question, once again from Everything Pro Wrestling. What is your favourite food to eat during a wrestling event? So I'm assuming he's referring to what snacks you'd have on offer in the table in front of you while watching it at home on TV. But for me, I've got a bit of tradition. Every time it's WrestleMania, I always get in pizza, and I finish it off with a bowl of profiterolls. I don't know why. I just love pizza. I love profiterolls, so I get them both in on WrestleMania night. And I'll probably do the same tomorrow night for Full Gear. But do you have a tradition as far as your snacks, and what snacks are top of your list when you're watching a live event?
I'll start off with cheeseburger,
right.
Especially if it's like a watch party and we can afford to get quite a lot. Do the burger, sometimes chips. Not the biggest chip lover, to be honest. And And I'd go for like pizza and garlic bread to share with people and stuff like that. But if it's just myself, I'll probably go a cheeseburger and a garlic bread. And it's weird the fact that this is my second guest appearance since starting podcasting again. And twice I've been asked about food. Like, I know I like my food, but it's okay. Yeah, right. I'm going to ask about food.
I think if you were to ask any wrestling fan, it'll be an interesting topic of conversation, because I think we all have our favourite snacks that we like to go to when watching wrestling shows. But let's have a look at Full Gear and the card that's taking place on Saturday night. AEW Full Gear. It's their third pay-per-view. Of course, we had Double or Nothing back in May. We had All Out at the end of August, and now we've got Full Gear. So it's been built quite nicely. I've got a list of 8 matches in front of me, one of which appears to be a pre-show match. So the pre-show match is B. Priestley versus Britt Baker, if I'm not mistaken. But any kind of any favourites there between B and Britt? Are you surprised to see Britt Baker on the pre-show? And who do you think will come out on top?
Pre-show. The way WWE have made pre-shows look has been such a negative thing. If you look at all the buy-ins so far, every fan is already in the building.
True.
Every fan is already in the seat. And that's why it's a buy-in, because it's nothing it's nothing that's lesser than what's going to be happening on the main show. It's something to make you buy in. It's something to be like, holy shit, that's amazing. I'm going to go buy the pay-per-view now. And that's what, quote-unquote, a pre-show should be. So I'm surprised they're on there. Maybe so. But I can understand why they are on there, because them two are going to absolutely kill it. And if a casual fan, whether or not they're watching on Fight TV, TNT, over here on ITV, and they're watching that, they're going to be like, actually, I'm going to stay up. I'm going to watch that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think out of all the matches, that'll be the one where I can understand why it's on the buy-in, for both in terms of importance, but the quality as well. Make sure that people are going to buy in.
Definitely. And who are you going with? Who's your pick?
I'd love to see B. Priestley take the win. Maybe some underhanded tactics to continue the feud with Britt Baker. But part of me is thinking Britt's not had the biggest run yet, and she's been essentially the marquee signing of the women's division.
True.
So my head says, well, my heart wants B. Priestley just because of the UK connection, and it'd love to see her do well. But I think they'll go with Britt Baker.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to go with Britt. Like I say, she was their marquee signing, the first ever signee to the women's division when AEW was first introduced to the world back in early January. So I'll be surprised.
She's a real dentist. She's a
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have to tell you that.
Yep. So I'm going for Britt as well. Let's have a look down the card. So we've got a match that was announced following a little bit of interjection between these two, Joey Janela and Sean Spears. So it was a match that was announced on this week's Dynamite, as we mentioned earlier. So it's officially part of the card. Joey Janela versus Sean Spears. For me, I think that Sean Spears has taken the win. I think he hasn't had, like I say, the best start as far as I'm concerned, but I understand what you said earlier, that he's a different character. He is different to when he was Ty Dillinger, the Perfect 10 in WWE, and it's kind of a bit of a build for him for greater things, and I think that this is the start of greater things to come for Sean Spears, and I think this is a good opportunity to pick up the W on this one. But as much as I love Joey Janela, I think that he can take the loss on this occasion, and I think it's Sean Spears. But what about yourself?
You've hit the nail on the head. I think Sean Spears will win. I want Sean Spears to win, and I think Sean Spears needs to win this. Yeah. Joey Janela can afford to take the loss because he's not had that real story, that real character pushing forward. He's had some great matches with Kenny Omega so far. He's been having all the violent stuff that's going on, and I think because of Joey Janela's personality, lovability, and his hardcore nature, he can afford to take these losses and get a run straight up, like off the back, like down the line. But I think with Sean Spears, if he loses this match, that's a big hit. I don't know how they'll recover if he loses to Janela.
The match for the AEW World Tag Team Championship. So it's now a 3-way. SCU, Frankie Kazarian and Scorpion Sky defending their championships that they won last week. And they will be going up against number one contenders and the team that they beat in the final of the tag team tournament, the Lucha Brothers, Pentagon Jr. and Phoenix, going up against the number two contenders, you could say, Private Party, who won their match against the Dark Order this week, to be included into that 3-way. So this should be quite an interesting match. I think you alluded to it earlier on. This is going to be a fast-paced, action-packed, 100-mile-an-hour match. I personally am expecting SCU to retain. I think it's too soon after winning the championships to lose them. If they were to lose, possibly the Lucha Brothers, but I've got to go with SCU. I think that Scorpio Sky is a talent to behold. I think that whether it's tag team or as a singles wrestler in the future, I think he's going to be an amazing success alongside Frankie Kazarian in this match. I think those two are retaining. So what about yourself, Kurt?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's too early for them to drop it. I think they've hit gold with Scorpio Sky, personally. I think it'd be too soon. I hope they don't change the belts for the shock factor, because I think that'd be too soon. I think Private Party are the ones they're in there to take the pin. I can't see Lucha Bros taking a pin again. So I think SCU going over Private Party.
Now onto the AEW Women's Championship, and Ryu defends her championship against fellow Joshi wrestler Emi Sakura. So these two have kind of fought on opposite sides of the rings a few times over the last few months, but this time the championship gold is on the line. I think for similar reasons to what you mentioned earlier, it's possibly a bit too soon for Ryu to lose the championship. AEW have invested a lot of time in Ryu in terms of really promoting her, getting behind her, making her their first women's champion. The gimmick of Emi Sakura, the kind of Freddie Mercury Queen gimmick, is it really getting over with the fans? You said earlier that some of her attempts to get the crowd into some of the charts weren't quite working. It should be a good match, I think, as a wrestling match. It should be pretty solid. These two obviously know their way around the ring and know each other very well. I think the chemistry should be pretty good and on point on the day. But I'm going for a Ryu win. But what about yourself?
Yeah, Riho to get the win. I think Sakura's probably the perfect person to make her get the best match so far from Riho. With the Freddie Mercury thing, I think it might be where they are. Full Gear is going to have a lot more of a hardcore based fans than what this week had, because a lot of people will be coming in from all over. So I think it'll have a better reaction this time. But for me, I'd book Riho to win. Riho to win.
And the next match has been building for a number of months, and this is their third match between these two opponents. Adam Page versus the Bastard Park in a singles match. I'm particularly looking forward to this one. I think both wrestlers are as close to being the total package as it comes, to be honest with you. And this one's going to be close to call, though. I mean, Pac's been getting quite a few wins of late, certainly on Dynamite and previous pay-per-views. Adam Page has already acknowledged that he's not had a good run of things and that he feels that he's let the fans down. So I think that Adam Page could turn things around a little bit here, and I think Adam Page is going to take the win in this one. But what about yourself?
I'd like to see Page take the win, but I think the way they've booked Pac so far, I'd say either Pac's winning or the match is going to be a draw. I can't see Page getting the win, and I think it's going to lead to Page getting more frustrated because he was the blue chip guy. He's the guy that Cody said he's world champion material, and I feel Page is going to break and to add a bit more to his character. I can see that happening, and I said before I'd love to see a feud between Kenny Omega and Adam Page, and I'm hoping that happens. I'd love that, and I think it'd just add another layer to Page to get him away out of their shadow. I think Pac to win. I think, Pac or a draw.
Interesting. How about the Young Bucks versus Santana and Ortiz? I mean, I think this is going to be another one of those 100-mile-an-hour matches. We know that the Young Bucks can go. We know that Santana and Ortiz can go. I'm sure these two teams have wrestled thousands of times before, so they're going to know each other very, very well. I think this match could be one to keep an eye on. It could potentially be match of the night. I think this one's going to be really, really hot. For myself, it's a close one, but I've got to go with Santana and Ortiz. They're the newer tag team that needs to be established a bit more in AEW. And I think that being part of the Inner Circle, I think that Santana and Ortiz are going to take the win on Saturday night, but it's going to be a close one. There could be some shenanigans. It could be a no contest. Who knows? But what do you think? How do you think this match is going to end?
It's just Santana and Ortiz are winning, in my opinion. But then it's another big loss for the Bucks. And again, I kind of like how they've been doing it with the Bucks. I like how they've been doing it with Omega. But for me, Santana Ortiz will get the win. And I think it's going to be a way to make the Bucks and Kenny to take things serious and turn it up a notch and be the elite of old.
Yeah. So the next match we're going to talk about, I think it's being billed as the main event of the night, or certainly the match that could potentially go on last. But I'm going to talk about it as if it's the kind of the semi-final match. But Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega, a non-sanctioned lights out match. So there's been a lot said about this, lot said about the gimmick added to it. Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega, they were meant to have fought one another at All Out back in August. That didn't happen because Moxley was out with an injury. So this feud's been going on for quite a few months now. The storyline's built and built and built. Both guys have given some pretty good backstage promos, and there's quite a bit of heat around this match in particular. As for who's going to win, I mean, it's a match that's kind of more designed around a Jon Moxley character. He's kind of the more unsanctioned, unhinged sort of character out the two. But Kenny Omega, I think he's adaptable. He can certainly turn it up with a more hardcore style when needed. It'd be interesting to see how far they take this match, to be honest with you, especially as they've gone, to great lengths to call it unsanctioned and lights out, and AEW are washing their hands with this one. But I suppose because of the nature of the match, I've got to go with Jon Moxley. But what about yourself?
I'm going to go with Moxley, just because of the promo of you're protecting your boy. You're making it so I don't beat Kenny Omega on the record books. And I think Moxley's going to win. It's going to be, again, tipping Kenny over the edge as well and make him... I think the building for the Elite and Kenny to sort something out. I think there might be shenanigans maybe from outside factors, but for me, Moxley's getting the win.
Agreed. And then I'm not sure whether this is going to go on last, but it certainly deserves to go on last with the build and all the hype that's gone on over the last few weeks since the match was announced. But Chris Jericho versus Cody for the AEW World Championship. I don't think we can fault the build to this match. It's got everybody looking forward to not just this match, but the whole show as a whole because of the effort that's gone into it from these two individuals. I mean, we've spoken at length about the passion and the emotion that Cody shows in his promos and in his delivery, but I think he can definitely go in the ring. Jericho, not as fast and as agile as he probably was 15, 20, 25 years ago, but I think he can still deliver. He's kind of modified his approach and he's modified his style to adapt to his age and to his opponent. And he can mix it up with the best of them. He's kind of shown that on AEW. He's shown that in New Japan as well. So this is going to be an interesting match. Two very, very experienced professional wrestlers that really know how to turn it on when the lights are on. But I'm expecting a really top-notch match here. Lots of emotion. Remember, you've got the 60-minute time limit feature with the three guest judges at ringside, so that could be a factor. I'm hoping the match doesn't go 60 minutes because I don't know whether it'll be as good a match if it goes that long. I'm expecting it to go maybe 35, 40. But this match is going to have a little bit of everything. Going back to the head versus heart thing here, Kurt, I mean, I think my heart is saying Cody, but my head is saying Jericho retains. But what about yourself?
Is it going to be a full pay-per-view with no title change? I don't think it will be. You've got Jericho going to Wrestle Kingdom to face Tanahashi. That's going to be his last match in New Japan.
Yes,
I reckon. So Tanahashi's going over. So will AEW actually want their champion to lose to Tanahashi? I think they're being quite clever. either they've done the stipulation regarding the judges to make people think it's going to go 60 minutes and it's not. But then I think with the judges, they could make it so Cody gets that win and Jericho feels betrayed because, of course, the judges are going to vote for the boss. Of course, the judges, because they want to be paid. They want their job. And there's a conspiracy because they didn't want Jericho as their champion. And the authority, or whatever you want to call them, the powers that be have made sure that Jericho is no longer champion. So I could see it going that way. You know what? I'm going to say Cody's winning.
Like I said, I'd love him to. Well, I suppose we're just going to have to tune in and find out, aren't we, Kurt? But I think Full Gear is going to be a phenomenal pay-per-view, and I can't wait to talk about that when we do the review on Sunday. But Kurt, that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's episode. Do you have any kind of any plugs, any social media handles that you want to throw out there to the listeners in case they want to get in touch with you or the Ringsider crew? Where can they get hold of you? Where can they find out about you and your podcast? Or where can they just come and say hi?
So you can find myself at Kurt Johansson 93. Just give us a tweet. I like discussing wrestling. If you do your own show and you're wanting me to discuss, then just drop me a message. My DMs are open. If you want to listen to me on a regular basis and see some of our older content, which we're going to be releasing as Ringsider Vaults, we will be releasing our great interviews with the likes of Lance Archer. You can find me weekly at Ringsider Pod. We've got quite a lot of interesting stuff happening. If you go onto the Zealots Network on YouTube, that's where you can find us at the moment. We will be doing our audio feeds shortly. Have a look at some of our older stuff as well. We've got Don't Even Get Me Started from our Wrestle Thoughts days. Let us know what you think of that. That's something that we're going to be bringing up. It's just three of us getting triggered about different things in wrestling. Check out Zealots Network on Twitter, which is at Zealots Network. And that way you can find where everything is. Ringsider at Ringsider Pod. Make It Darker at Make Darker. The Occult at Occult Pod. They're all in the bio of Zealots Network. Have a look, see what we're doing.
Superb. Well, Kurt, I want to thank you so much for being our special guest host on this Ask Johners Q&A special, anniversary special. So thank you. I hope you've enjoyed your Wrestling with Johners experience, buddy.
No, I've loved it. Thank you for having me. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to the podcast.
Yay.
I hope the listeners have liked it. I've really enjoyed it. I wouldn't mind coming back in the future. So if you have enjoyed me and Johners just tearing up speaking wrestling, then put in the requests. Say hashtag bring back Kurt.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have to do that. But I've got a few other thank yous before we say goodbye to our listeners. Thanks to everyone that's helped with the rise of the Wrestling with Johners podcast. Guest hosts that I'm going to list off now, Matt Bayliss, David Anderson, that have been there from day one pretty much, Heather Padbury and Chris Martin, who occasionally drop on and help us with pay-per-view reviews. And Chris Martin, a very, very talented rapper based out of London, who created and produced the opening theme to the Wrestling with Johners podcast. Chris Thornton and Ash Crawford, who tend to do our AEW reviews, and they'll be joining me on Sunday for the Full Gear review. Other guest hosts, Kieran Reid, Ashley Clements, Jason Lee Wood, Tommy Lynch from Watch Along Wrestling on YouTube, Ditz from Ditz on Wrestling, Josh Robinson, and even cheeky Dan Grantham, and a big thank you to Kurt Johansson. Yes, I'm the only person that can say his surname correctly, but thank you so much for helping us out and being part of the Wrestling with Johners family. So a big thank you also has to go out to Nick Towers. Now, Nick is a friend of the Wrestling with Johners podcast and Wrestling with Johners Facebook community page. And Nick also he is the artist behind the cover art for episode 77, the anniversary edition. So a shout out to Nick there for doing a fantastic job on the kind of the graphics and the artwork for episode 77. So thank you. I also want a bit of a shout out and a thank you to my family and my wife especially for being so patient, with me. Doing all these podcast episodes. It works out about 1.5 podcasts per week, which is a lot when you've got to manage a full-time job and look after your family. And they've been very patient with me, kind of shutting myself away for a few hours at a time to do this on a weekly basis. So thank you. Also, thank you to many of the guests I've interviewed on the podcast over the last 12 months, including Sean McMahon, Gary Ward, Sean Custom, Jimmy Corderas, and most recently, Gary Michael Capetta. So I've enjoyed every moment of making these 77 episodes of the podcast, and I've learned so much about writing and producing and editing podcasts, as well as how to market the podcast and how to make the best use of social media. It's a bit of an art form in itself, how to kind of use social media to get the word out there. I've learned so much about graphic design and video editing, and I'm keen to continue improving the quality of my podcast and video content for all of my lovely listeners for the next 12 months to come. More importantly, I've made so many great friends through the podcast, and in fact it was our connections through our respective podcasts that I first got introduced to Kurt, and we kind of said hello to one another through Twitter, and in exactly the same way that I've become great friends with so many other podcasters out there over the last 12 months. So once again, thank you to all the listeners, thank you to my friends and family, thank you to Kurt for helping us out with today's episode. Our next episode will drop on Sunday the 10th, where Ash Crawford and Chris Thornton will be helping me to do a full review of Full Gear, and we've discussed it already. We've laid down our predictions, and I'm sure it'll be a hell of a show. But in the meantime, please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT and NXT UK, AEW updates, and WWE and AEW pay-per-view reviews, and so much more. And if you've enjoyed listening to the podcast, please don't forget to spread the word, tell your friends and tell your family, and don't forget to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, people, and tell your friends and family about the Wrestling with Johners podcast. If they hit subscribe, they will get notified every time a new episode drops. But from myself and from Kurt Johansson, thank you very much for listening. Have a great weekend, and speak to you all soon.
Bye for now.